Okay, thanks everybody for attending, and welcome to the inaugural Radarbase Symposium. It's been a few years in planning, but largely held up because of the pandemic. So anyway, it should be a very, very nice day. So I will do a quick introduction to the symposium, just to define, I guess, what we're broadly after and what we're trying to kind of get out of the day. So in the morning, we've got a morning session and an afternoon session and lunch in between, and we'll have an introduction to the Radarbase platform, and that will kind of cover all of the components and the general function of Radarbase. And then we will have a few keynotes. So the first will be on analyses that have been carried out from the Radar CNS project. So then we'll have a session of lightning talks. So these will cover a whole range of things, particularly around the sort of engineering side of Radarbase. So that session will be then followed by lunch, and we have an online poster session. I'm afraid we had thought about running this. The original plans was to run this fully in person for the day, but we weren't sure what the situation with the pandemic was. So I'm afraid we kind of improvised the poster session. So you can actually vote online. There's a link to the Google Drive. I'll also copy that over here. And there are some instructions to follow. You'll have the opportunity to download the Radarbase app, and you can vote for the posters through that. Then we have an external presentation from one of our collaborators, original collaborators on Radarbase, who's now working at Vibrant Health, and they're involved in a very exciting project in the US called All of Us. So this is an initiative to take sequencing data from 1 million people, but also they're pairing that with mobile health data from Fitbit devices. So there's a component of that study that's using a mobile health architecture. So that's very some similar examples to things we're doing in Radarbase. Then we have another session of lightning talks. These will be more on the sort of focused on the kind of use cases of various applications of Radarbase around. And then we have a session just to show you how to get involved with Radarbase, something to cover some of the various offerings for the Radarbase community. And then there is a quick presentation on the next steps for Radarbase. These are things that we have planned for future development work, functionality that we're interested in building. So yeah, very happy to have feedback on that session. And then we have our final keynote, which is, I think, going to be a very interesting talk. So this is a project we started at sometime around the beginning of the pandemic, which was a partnership with Fitbit. And this will look at trying to use the Fitbit data to predict COVID, but also look at things like, characterize the duration of long COVID. And then finally, we have some poster prizes and some prizes for the lightning talk sessions. Okay. So I'm going to take a couple of slides just to sort of, I think, we want to sort of sprinkle a little bit of, the ideas around why we started Radarbase, and the kinds of themes and perhaps challenges as well that we're going to face in this domain. So Radarbase really was started because we wanted the ability to start collecting the kind of data that was being generated by wearable devices. And we're starting to see really, we're very much in the kind of Wild West at the moment. That there's not so much consensus on how this kind of data should be collected. But we're starting to see sort of sensors where you're getting kind of things like continuous glucose monitoring. You've got lots of things that sort of tie into sort of physiological data, but also things that characterize behavioral experience. So the idea here was radar was able to collect data from wearable devices, from mobile phones. More recently, we've also integrated Internet of Things sensors. So there's a kind of exemplar of that that actually we're running in the room next door. So that'll be monitoring all sorts of various parameters from the kind of air quality through to temperature, light sensors, etc. So we kind of try and sort of characterize what I think kind of radar-based really is. I actually used to work around the corner here on the human genome project when I was principally working as a sort of bioinformatician. So we used to have, this was almost 20 years ago, we used to have fresh presses of the human genome delivered every week, and we would apply some algorithms to that to try and identify where the new genes were in the sort of raw sequence of the genome. So I think the next sort of 20 years from then have really seen sort of just enormous leaps forward in what you can do in terms of sequencing genes. But we know, the kind of contribution to the health, physiology, to the phenotype is also involves sort of the environmental effects. So, I mean, I kind of think in many ways we're at the beginning of this journey, but I think of kind of radar-based is really the kind of capacity to sort of sequence or really kind of build a picture of the phenotype in a way that I don't think we've had up to recent times. So I think kind of this idea of kind of radar-based as a sort of a phenotype sequencer is sort of something I like very much. And then the other kind of aspect of radar-based, which we really tried to sort of get to at the start of the project, was scale. And scale is very, very difficult in this context. We'll hear some about some of the challenges of that in some of the talks coming, but generally speaking, this idea at the moment of transitioning between research applications where we're trying to gather that data to learn something through to taking that information and doing something practical with it, I think is a really, really interesting challenge. And to do that at scale, I think is really something we need to sort of think about. But yes, lots of other challenges around standards, policy. We know that the kind of underlying kind of systems running on mobile phones are changing very, very rapidly, and that sort of flies in the face of how to build a system that is that you rely on for medical purposes. But yes, there are tons of challenges. I think I'm running low on time, so I won't go into these too much. My last slide just was to make a plug for a public event that's running on Wednesday. That's the kind of valedictory meeting for the Radar CNS project. So this is it sort of it's come up to the end of that project, and they're doing a public event. So if anyone's very interested in this, I'll put a copy of the link to that event in here. Okay.
Yes, while we change presentations, I just want to highlight a few practical points. First of all, everyone in person, if you have questions, please contact any of the organizers. These are me, Amos, Richard over there, or Jessica. We will also be taking pictures. If you don't want to be on pictures, please let us know. We will basically use the pictures for marketing purposes or just to be used as part of the radar-based community events. Then we want to remember presenters, please time your presentation, keep the last 5 to 10 minutes for questions. And then all the people online, you are welcomed to ask questions. You can use the YouTube chat option. We will be tracking the questions. And for the people in person, please raise your hand and use the microphone. Everyone, please use the microphone. If you talk without the microphone, people online cannot hear well, so it's very uncomfortable for them. So let's all use the microphones when talking. Then you all received also information for voting. Emma's already introduced the concept of the voting. We will send you another email with the instructions again. Also a QR code that you can use to use the active RMT arm of the radar-based platform. And this is what we will use for the voting of the posters and the lightning talks. and you can use this QR code after the lunch break. We will also hang the QR codes all over the venue, so you can also scan it directly. And then finally, at the end of the event, we have a networking session at the pub. Everyone is welcome to join. We will walk all together, and you will receive more instructions on how to get there at the end of the event. And I think that's it. The schedule is pretty tight, so we will also interrupt presenters if you are talking for too long, just for the purpose of trying to stick to the schedule and finish on time. So I think we are ready for next presentation.
Okay, so my name is Colm Carroll. I'm what we call a scientific project manager at Innovative Health Initiative. You can't see, there's a little logo and where my picture is. So I'm going to, you would have seen on the previous slide that Amos presented that Radar Base is funded under the Innovative Medicines Initiative. And I'll come on to explain the difference between Innovative Health Initiative and Innovative Medicines Initiative later on. But first of all, just say I'm really happy to be able to come here. It's my first face-to-face meeting in over 2 years. So it's a real pleasure to come and talk about Radar Base. I'm going to talk about it from our point of view, and I was asked to talk about the history and the goals, and I've added a little bit about the future as well, and I'll come on to that at the end. But first of all, just to introduce IMI, under which Radar Base is funded. It's a funding agency under the European Commission's Horizon 2020 programme. And what makes IMI a bit different from other Horizon 2020 funding programmes is that IMI funds collaborative research projects in health, and all the projects are public-private partnerships. So we match up academics, hospitals, small companies, etc., with large pharmaceutical companies, such as in this case, Janssen is a big leader in this project. And the idea is that some of the challenges in healthcare are probably a little bit too complex, too difficult for individual stakeholders to solve by themselves. So if we can put them all together, give them a nice bit of funding, hopefully we can overcome some of these challenges. And you can see, for example, in Radar Base, it's quite a complex area. You need quite a lot of expertise to match everything up to try to make a difference to patients at the end of the day. The way we work is we run calls for proposals where we ask for people to apply for various topics. And the call for proposals under which Radar Base was funded was actually launched in, I think it was December 2014. And I checked my emails, I searched my emails before I came here, because I know the discussions around this actually started a couple of years before that. So it was probably 10 years ago we first started thinking about this type of project. And you'll see here Radar Base, as Amos said, is part of the Radar CNS project, and Radar stands for Remote Assessment for Disease and Relapse. And what we wanted to do is obviously try to understand how people experience their conditions using the wealth of data that is then available from all these devices that Amos presented. So when we launched our call, what we asked for was, apart from the clinical side of the project, we asked for a platform, the project to prepare a platform that will measure all these different aspects across the disease areas in question, the CNS disease areas. And that's more or less all we asked for, just about that. I think we foresaw that there may be other projects in the program, Radar AD, Alzheimer's disease, and we asked this platform be made available for that. But that was it. So we just left it at that, and it was up to the people in the project to develop radar as they felt fit. And you will see later on today what that came to. And from our point of view, the fact that the decision was made to make it open source, the decision was made to not just make it scalable, but make it expandable quite easily to beyond the program itself, are really successes from our point of view, and something that we're quite proud of that you've managed to do so. And so much so, on the next slide I'll show you, when we transitioned from IMI to IHI, we in the office were asked to put together a few slides on the highlights from IMI to show to our governing board. And one of the ones I put together was this, which is about your platform. So I stole the image from your website, but basically this is judged one of the key successes. And it's the fact that it's gone beyond the project itself, so facilitating loads more studies, which I guess we'll hear about later on today, a lot of new participants, and the additional funding, additional investment that has come in. These are all things we want to see in our projects, so kind of this independent stamp of approval, independent success. So from that point of view, RadarBase is going completely in the right direction from our point of view. So I'll move on to talk a little bit about IHI and why RadarBase is relevant there. So as the name suggests, Innovative Health Initiative, as opposed to Innovative Medicines Initiative, means we're moving beyond just medicines, moving beyond just the pharmaceutical industry. And we're trying to address challenges in healthcare more generally now, and we've expanded our partnership as well. So this is a little bit of a complicated slide that we use to explain the difference, and just to highlight a couple of points which are relevant for you. Digital health is obviously, everyone's working on digital health these days, but that's where we want to move on, and medical technology more generally. So you can see that harnessing data from a lot of these new areas are something extremely important for us. Another major feature here, and I know under IMI we already emphasized this about being patient-centric, but now it's becoming even more so. And there's a big emphasis on delivery for patients, so moving beyond just research and moving closer to the clinic and having an impact on patients a bit more directly. And of course, coupled with that, we want to engage healthcare professionals a bit more in our projects. And I think you can see Radar CNS and RadarBase are already doing so. And the major differences in terms of their industry members is most of these won't mean very much to you, but we have COSIR, which is an umbrella organization for a lot of the medical imaging, radiotherapy, electronic healthcare record companies, and MedTech Europe, which has got a lot of diagnostics, a lot of digital health, a lot of small companies as well. And these are coming in on the private side. And therefore the shift, moving away from medicines more towards digital, is very pronounced, and something where we're going to move to in the future. And I think RadarBase could have a very important role there. And just to finish off then, just to say a bit more tangibly about where we're going, this is something which is on our website now. It's a potential future topic. They're still in discussion, so it's not guaranteed this will be launched, but it gives you an idea. And the topic aims to put together various bits of health data from a broad variety of sources and try to use that data for decision-making, both for self-care for patients, but also for decision-making by clinicians. And you can see here one of the bits of the topic is we want the topic to develop or further develop a scalable open-source platform to access integrate data from, and we've got wearables, etc. here, but also, and I was quite pleased to see this on Amos's slide about electronic health records, because we want to include routine clinical care, clinical trials, PREMs, PROMs, etc. So I think where RadarBase is something that's going to be very, very useful in the future and very important in the future. So hopefully you'll be able to apply for this and hopefully make a difference. So I'll finish there, and I'm really looking forward to the day and finding out more about the platform. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Colin? Okay.
Okay, then we move on to next speaker, which is Nivetika Mahasim. She has a background in computer engineering, and she's working at the Hive with Redabase for already more than 5 years. She's a software developer and also a product manager, so for Redabase. And today she will introduce, do a general introduction of the platform to get started with it.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here in person, and also everybody who have joined online. So I'm Nivetika. I am a product manager at the Hive. Like Maria said, I joined Redabase 5 years ago as a software engineer. So it's really, I'm really happy and very proud to be here in the stage, the first Redabase Symposium. And also briefly about the Hive. The Hive is an IT company based in Utrecht, and our vision is to enable open source, open science by developing and implementing open source solution and verifying data. So Redabase is one of the core solutions that we are focusing on. And I'll start with the story of Redabase. I think Amos and Colm already gave you enough information background about how Redabase came into play. So as they said, Redabase started with the REDA CNS project. REDA stands for Remote Assessment of Diseases and Relapses, and CNS is for Central Nervous System. So the REDA CNS project focused on 3 different disease areas: major depression, and epilepsy and multiple sclerosis. And the idea in the project was to really build a platform that can connect different data, because we were interested in different diseases, and of course different diseases would be focusing on different functional domain. So the idea is to have a flexible application that we can use for the whole project. So we had that flexibility in our mind when we were building the platform. So in 2016, we started thinking about the architecture, what are the core principles that the platform should cater. And in 2017, we had the first prototype ready. And of course, the first study that used Redabase was the CNS study. And in 2018, we also launched this platform as Redabase open source platform, because we saw the potential of the platform and we saw how it can be reused in future studies, how it can be further extended to really address challenges of people who are in the same domain. And in 2019, Reda AD, which is a sister project of, we consider it as a sister project where lots of the efforts that we have put into Reda CNS was reused, and we were again applying Redabase for Alzheimer's disease. And in this project, we further developed Redabase and made it really improve the maturity, applied it for Alzheimer's, made it a scalable solution. And since the beginning, already from 2017 onwards, mostly from 2019 and now, the platform has been reused by a wider community who want to use a platform similar to Redabase, both in academical but also in commercial setting. An idea about what this Redabase platform is, like I said, it's a base platform to collect data to assess diseases and relapses. So it can do both passive monitoring and active monitoring, and passive monitoring can be done in several ways. First, we also developed a passive app called PRMT app. This app uses the native sensors in the mobile phone to collect native sensor data passively, and it can send that data directly to the platform, or the app can also pair with peripheral Bluetooth devices to get data from additional wearable sensors. And in some cases, when you think about consumer-based devices like Fitbit or Garmin, they send their data first to their cloud, and in that case, you can also get this data from their cloud to the platform. And in some cases, indeed, some of the devices that you use, they don't have one of these ways to share the data. They would just share the raw data or in other proprietary format. In that case, it is possible to upload the data manually in the data upload portal, and this data would be again harmonized with the other data that you collect in the platform. And the other layer that we are working on is currently in the proof of concept level, which is also to integrate with Internet of Things. So you can run this module on a more low-level hardware like Raspberry Pi or Ruby Pi and integrate with additional sensors like which Amos just mentioned in the session. And there's another layer for collecting active data that would be using the Active Warranty app. So that would be based on questionnaires or active tasks that you have to do to, I don't know, to check your cognitive level or how you're feeling, your mental well-being, etc., but also for patient-reported outcome. And all of this data would be sent to the Radar-based platform. So, like you can see, the core principle of the platform is to have a modular and extensible architecture that you can extend when you want to add integration to a new device or app. Then that should be easy, and the amount of effort that we have to put into should be as less as possible. And the platform can also receive data in real time, but it's also possible to do it in retrospective. But the key idea is that the architecture is event-based, and you can process the data event by event as you receive. And the other core principle is the whole pipeline. Once the data received to the platform is streamlined. So again, we don't have to repeat steps for every new integration that we do. And of course, it's open source platform, and we also try to use open source technologies as much as possible, so it still remains open source, and we can apply this to as many applications as possible. So here you can see some of the selected devices and apps that are already integrated in the platform. As I mentioned, in the Radar base we have two apps. One is PRMT app and the ARMT app, and it also supports Empatica lithium pharos, which are more of a medical graded device which send really high resolution raw data to the platform, but also devices like Fitbit and Garmin who are consumer based, and we can get the data from the cloud. And Dream is a headband which is to analyze, which has an EEG, which would also give you sleep state data at a low level. And at the bottom you can see the additional devices that we integrated for Radar AD to monitor different cognitive levels for Alzheimer's disease. So Altoida app itself, it can give you some active tasks, and based on that, it can assess your cognitive level, and it can give you an indicator about your risk for early Alzheimer's. And the banking app is like a simple banking app, and based on that, you can also assess your cognitive level. Activities, it's a simple accelerometer logger, and CanEdge is it's a device that can give you indications about how you're driving. As Fibaro is also some smart home device that could also give you indication about how well you're moving, how controlled you are in a space. So these are really, you can see different types of devices and different types of apps that can that are integrated into the platform to look into, different research questions. So yeah, the platform. These are again some of the important things that are built into the platform that are really core to the platform. One is the flexibility and scalability. Like I said, every technologies that we use and the core architecture principles are scalable, so you can use it for a study with 10 participants or 500 or 10,000 participants. And we also use standards and standard APIs as much as possible. So we use OAuth2 for integrations, and because it's also important for database to coexist with other applications, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we should be as flexible as possible to also integrate with other systems, other apps. And it's fully containerized and configurable. So like I said, for different use cases, it can be configured and adjusted to fit to a specific use case. And also it can be hosted in any infrastructure. It can also be deployed in hospital, in your own premise infrastructure, but also in cloud or any cloud solutions that you choose. And the second core principle is the data compliance. So like you said, the data that we collect is really important, and based on the use case, you also want to get the value of the data as soon as possible. So first of all the data that we get into the platform are validated, so we know exactly which data sources sending a particular data to which participant it's assigned to. And every data point that comes into, it's also, as it comes, it's already validated against the data schema that it is expected to. So you don't have to go and do a lot of data curation before you can start analysis. It's already done in the pipeline. And it's also possible to do real-time analytics to detect anomalies. So it can be, data anomalies, but also some specific events. Let's say if the heart rate goes low, or if someone is disconnected from a phone or an app, then you can send notifications, so you can make any interventions that you want to do. And the other thing is also, we also have a data compliance dashboard, which you will also see later today, that give you an indication about how well the data collection is going, how well the study is, how compliant a participant is to the study. And the other core thing is the data repository, because at the end, what you get from the platform is really structured, curated data, and we use standard repository APIs, which you can use to store the data, and the platform also has its own object storage as part of the platform, and you can deploy it as a standalone solution. And the data repository also uses open formats and open standards. So as if you look into a data, then you don't have to depend on someone else to get work with the data. The data also comes with its own schema, and the schema is fully documented, so you can do the analysis without depending on who the data collector is or who the data producer is. And every data point that you get is structured, timestamped, so you don't have to put a lot of effort into identifying who this data belongs to. And indeed, so the data that we are collecting, it's one of the real-world data, and in real-world data, there's a lot of challenges. And as we build the platform, we try to address these solutions out of the box as much as possible. So real-world data, it can be heterogeneous, unstructured, data can be missing, and of course, one of the core principles is the thing to focus is the privacy and security of the data, because it's really sensitive. So how we address some of these challenges is one is the schemas that we have, and all of the data and the schemas that we have in the platform is harmonized, and we try to also follow the standard. So fair data is it's really important, and the database schemas are kind of inspired by the Open mHealth. Is not like one-to-one match to Open mHealth, but it resembles Open mHealth standard to a great level. So all of the data that any integration that we would perform to the platform, the first thing we would do is to define the schemas, and that's also where we put a lot of effort into, because the schemas has to be right, and once the schemas are right, then the data integration can be done a lot faster. So as you can see, like if you're getting an accelerometer data from two devices, then the schemas are the same. So you can apply the same algorithm that you make for one device to the other. And the data is also structured and pseudonymized, and you can find the pseudonymized identifier from the study management portal of the rare database. And this is a screenshot of the data compliance dashboard I mentioned. But here you can see how continuous the data is and how compliant a participant is, and which of the data sources are more compliant than to the other. So here you are seeing how at the bottom a compliant of a Fitbit device, but also a passive app of the rare database. So to summarize, some of the key advantage of using rare databases: first, you have full ownership of the platform and of the study, and of course, different studies you want to set it up differently. You want to have different control and ownership of the platform. And second, as I mentioned earlier, the access is via standard API, so it can be integrated with other platforms and apps. And we also have high availability because it's scalable and it can be deployed on, we can avoid a single point of failure. And also optionally we can do data locking and versioning, which are also really important to have good data governance principles. And data security and privacy is really important. So in rare database, we have a study management system which also provides you role-based access levels. So we have the concept of project, and all of the roles are based on a particular project. So anyone who has access to a project can access data around a particular project and participants, and the others, they wouldn't have access to a particular project. And the next is token-based authentication. So it's also, again, one of the standard ways to collect data. And if the token is expired, then that participant has to either log in again. So it also gives you a lot of security about the ongoing interaction that you have with the system. And we also have audit logging, so you can also see who's doing what. And it's also really important if you want to have the platform validated. And the data also can be encrypted at rest, and by default, it's encrypted on transit. And again, the quality of the data, I consider it really high because it ensures schema compliance, and also the schemas are really open and format it tries to fit to a standard. And the amount of knowledge you get from the data, again, it's fully documented schema, so you can just read the documentation. It's both human readable, but also you can treat it as a machine readable file, and harmonized schemas in a different level of access controls to the data, but also to the platform and the study management system itself. So it also allows you to do reproducible research. So you can run the algorithm again, or different people can run the same algorithm again, and you will be able to get the same result. So I will also quickly go through some of the use cases where a database has been used. So this is one of the use cases, which is called CHDR More, which we collaborated with the CRO based in the Netherlands called Center for Human Drug Research. And their idea, the goal was also similar to what rare database was trying to solve. They also wanted to see if home-based remote monitoring trials can really prove value and compared to a traditional based clinical trial. So for this use case, what we did was we integrated with additional device that the customer wanted to have, and also we customized the PRMT app to work with another device called Nuvoair. It's a pyrometer. And so in this case, we made integrations with additional devices, and it's a white label product which is called CHDR More. And in this case, it's also validated against 21 CFR Part 11 and other frameworks that are required in this case. And the second use case is one of the use cases from RADA CNS. So this is for the epilepsy. So in this case, the platform was deployed in hospital, and the participants were monitored in hospital next to the golden standards of monitoring epileptic patients, next to EEG and video, but also they were wearing the devices that were integrated to RADA base, and they were monitored for period continuously. And then we were comparing the data that we got from EEG and video and the data that we got from the wearables. So in this case, you can see, you can clearly see the data that we got from Empatica. You can clearly see when they had a seizure and like how continuous this data is. And this is another use case where RADA base was again customized for a particular use case. So in this case, by default in RADA base, we use manual recruitment, and you talk to a participant, you tell them this is what you have to do, and they are kind of onboarded to the platform and to the study. In this case, the target was broader, and we were interested in migrants who come to the UK and how good their well-being is and how useful the NHS system is. So we just wanted to reach out to the audience and see who are interested in taking part in this research study. So for this particular case, we customized the ARMT Act so the people can register themselves and do e-consent and take part in the study. So this is mostly based on questionnaires at the moment. And so in this case, one of the research questions that research findings that they were looking into is also do A/B testing, so to run micro-randomized trials to see where you have more compliance. So like what would be the right timing to send reminders, what would be the right timing to send questionnaires and notifications, etc. So that's also one of the things that the platform allows. And so here you can see the ARMT app was customized to kind of fit the other use case that they were looking into. So this is another project that has recently started. Like Callum mentioned, that it kind of looks into the broader spectrum of real-world data. And this also focuses on patient centricity and to kind of give back the control to the patients of their own health data. So this is for the aim of the project is to build a health outcome observatory and to integrate different observation data, so including from and PRAMs, but also data from EHRs and from disease registries to have a continuous idea of patient-reported outcome and to see how valuable this data is for the patients themselves. So this is a project that has just started 1 year ago, and we are really in this early stage, and we are also trying to see how we can adapt RADA base and reuse for this particular use case. So to summarize, RADA base has been already used in more than 45 case studies, including where KCL and the Hive, where we are really active in the RADA base, but also some applications are from the community itself, that they have managed to install RADA base themselves, and they run standalone self-managed studies themselves. And right now it's also looking into around 20 disease areas ranging from mental health, but also cancer, cardiovascular disease, lung disease, COVID, different disease areas, and more than 44,000 participants are currently either in the study or plan to take part in the study. And right now, also more than 13 devices or apps are integrated, and we are also working on integrating with more devices and apps. So with that, I would like to summarize about how the platform started and where we have where we want to focus in the future. So we want to make this platform available for all, not just so also focusing on different types of audience, different types of participants, but also different types of research, including early stage researchers, but also farmers and different kind of researchers who are looking into this area, and also trying to meet evolving latest demands, so let it be technical requirement, but also latest standards and whatever that's necessary to keep the platform sustainable. And we also try to join forces, so like whoever is in this area and trying to reuse database, we also try to bring as much as possible back to the platform, back to the community, and help people who are trying to use database within the same disease or disease areas, so that you can share your ideas, you can share your efforts. So this event is also one of the first step and one of the important steps to take that forward. So yeah, I think that's it. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to.
So I think we have probably enough time for just a couple of questions. Are there any takers in the audience?
Thank you. I applaud your architecture choice. I think it's fantastic. And I thank you for your effort, actually. I've just got two questions, small questions. One is, in FAIR, how do you address the F in FAIR? Or is it just that you need to plug into something else to be more discoverable? And the second one is the iWatch going to be a target?
iWatch. So iPhones and iOS in particular, they are less open to share data. So it's one of the things that we have in the roadmap. So one of the ways to get data from iOS is to integrate with HealthKit. So it's kind of an area that we are looking into for the future. But it is something that we have looked into. So we did build a prototype for iOS BRMT app, but it gives less data when you're collecting it passively. But it's possible if you have like an active task, then you can get native sensor data from iOS as well.
Okay, and I guess the thing about the FAIR is, in what way, or if at all, can it populate, say, a data catalog or make it visible outside of the research project that this is a research data set that could be reused for other purposes?
Yeah, so about the data sets, I think we are still working on that to make it to reshare this data set to audience who are not really part of the platform. But the data schemas and the data that we collect, it's already public. You can go and find the data catalog or the schema catalog. You can already find that. The data catalog is kind of part of the ecosystem. So if you're already logged into the system, then you can find to which study it belongs to which patient it belongs to. But to make it available to wider audience, I think it involves a lot of ethics and governance, etc., which is still being discussed.
Yeah, I probably just add one more bit to that. Can you hear me on this? So as Nivetic says, the data is structured. There are obviously kind of, depending on the project, access to that data may vary, maybe more or less open. There are things like audio data sets that are obviously much more sensitive, or GPS data, and those kinds of things would obviously require governance before you could make those findable. But once that step has been accomplished, you could converting those into some, putting them into a repository. There are a few mobile health repositories. There's one that's run by SageBio called dHealth. And it would be possible to transform the data into something like that.
Another question? Thanks. So obviously it's open source, which is great, and that means that I guess people can take the code and integrate their own devices by themselves outside of your knowledge. Is there a way for that code to come back into your, I don't know what you call it, your parent code?
I think it depends. We do try to encourage people to keep it open source. So within different projects, when we do integrations, we try to at least keep the schemas open source, but sometimes they are less open for that. So in that case, it's not open source, and also, until now they come to the community to ask questions about how to do this integration, and then they will try to tell them the advantages of keeping it open source, because then they also get more from the community. So we do try to, I think, as far as I know, most of the integrations are open source and they're part of the platform.
Yeah, I mean, we had a long conversation about this at the start of the project, and the consensus was that we would release under Apache 2 license, which is fairly permissive. And the idea was that we wanted to get people to contribute code back into the project. But we didn't want to restrict third parties from making kind of commercial applications out of it. I think we'd rather a bigger tent and have people encouraged to kind of contribute into that than sort of keep it under something that's very, very tightly controlled. Yuzu, I think.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Yuzu Zhang, who's a PhD student at King's College London. He's currently working on mobile health data sets and looking at how these can be reused in research and clinical applications. The major theme of Yuzu's PhD is working on depression. And he's been doing a lot of analysis on the radar CNS project data, so he's going to present that now.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuezhou. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm a PhD student from King's, supervised by Richard and Amos. Today I'm going to talk about analysis of major depression disorder using phone and wearable data from the radar CNS study. I will first introduce the background of depression and the motivation of using mobile technologies to monitor depression. And then I will introduce an amazing EU digital depression dataset called RADAR MDD dataset, collect our behaviors that related to depression by using our radar-based platform. And then I will summarize my previous works related to the associations between depression and individual behaviors that measured by mobile technologies such as sleep, social activities, and mobilities. Finally, I will present our future work plans and discuss our challenges faced. Depression is a prevalent and serious mental health disorder. It can cause some physical health and psychological function problems, resulting in loss of productivities and high social burden. It's also a leading cause of disability worldwide. However, current depression diagnosis relies on scaled clinicians and self-report questionnaires, which have some limitations, such as subjectively recall bias and dynamic information loss. Consequently, many people with depression do not receive timely and effective treatment. Therefore, more effective methods of depression detection and monitoring are needed. Mobile technologies provide a convenient and cost-efficient and unobstructed means to monitor behaviors that related to depression. So, therefore, more studies start to use mobile devices, embedded sensors to investigate the depression. And the RADAR Major Depressive Disorder Project is the largest and the longest multi-center digital depression studies, which was conducted by WorkPack 6 clinical teams of RADAR CNS. And here is its study protocol and data description paper available online. And this project aimed to use remote measurement technologies to monitor people with depression for up to 2 years. 623 participants with depression history were recruited in 3 study sites in UK, Spain, and the Netherlands. Participants' active data, such as the questionnaires and passive data from mobile phones and Fitbit devices, were continuously collected through our radar-based platform. First, I will talk about depression and sleep recordings. Sleep disturbances are prevalent among people with depression. For example, insomnia, hypersomnia, sleep quality, and change in sleep architectures are associated with depression. Therefore, it is necessary to assess sleep quality continuously. However, 2 traditional sleep assessments have some limitations. The PHG assessment is the golden standard of sleep assessment, but it is uncomfortable, time-consuming, and expensive. So it is not suitable for the long-term sleep monitoring. And the sleep questionnaires, which relies on subjectively recall and may be inaccurate. So wearable devices provide the low-cost and convenient means to monitor individual sleep in the home setting. And this study aimed to design more sleep-related features and test whether the wearable devices could capture the sleep conditions, and then explore the associations between sleep features and self-reported depression severity. The participants' depression severity was assessed by the PHQ-8 questionnaires every 2 weeks, conducted through mobile phones. And the PHQ-8 questionnaires has 8 sub-items questions, and the total score ranges from 0 to 24 with increasing severity. And if the PHQ-8 is greater than or equal to 10 points, the participant is likely in a depressive state. And this is the PHQ-8 questionnaires, and the third sub-item is related to the sleep directly, and it asks the participant whether they had the troubles in falling or staying asleep or stayed asleep too much during the past 14 days. And this is the recordings stored in our platform, and the participant's sleep was recorded by the Fitbit, and the sleep was divided into 4 sleep stages. They are awake, light, deep, and rapid eye movement. And we extracted several features from 2 weeks prior to each PHQ-8 score to describe the sleep characteristics in that period, and sleep we extracted can be divided into 5 categories. There are sleep architectures, sleep stability, sleep quality, insomnia, and hypersomnia. And we want to find the associations between the sleep features and the sleep subscore, that is the sub-item in the PHQ-8 and the total PHQ-8 score, to find whether the Fitbit recordings could capture the sleep conditions and to find out the relationship between these features and the depression severity. So we applied the linear mixed effect models to find the associations between sleep features and the sleep subscore and the total PHQ-8 score respectively. And we found the several sleep features such as deep sleep awakenings and sleep deficient, insomnia, and hypersomnia are all significantly correlated with the self-reported sleep quality, that is the sleep subscore in the PHQ-8. Therefore, it illustrated that the features extracted from the Fitbit sleep recordings could capture the sleep conditions and qualities. And the associations between sleep features and depression can be summarized as, along with the depressive status worsening, the following trends may be seen in the past 2 weeks. That there are increased awake time in sleep, increased sleep variance, such as the standard deviation in the sleep duration of the past 14 days, and the reduced sleep quality, and more days with insomnia or hypersomnia. And here is an example of the potential depression relapse case. And we can notice that there is this participant has an increasing trend in the PHQ-8 score. We can see that in the 13th and the 14th PHQ-8 score, there is an increasing trend. And we can observe that these sleep features were changed obviously at the same time. However, there are still some limitations. We did not consider the sleep peers as the confounded variables, and we did not also consider the time naps, and some important parameters may be needed, such as the postural information, sleep onset latency, that were not provided by the old version of the Fitbit devices, so we may need some new version. These variables are important for estimating the insomnia. And next, I will discuss our findings in depression and Bluetooth data. Since depression is closely associated with individuals' behaviors, such as the social interactions, work status, mobilities, isolations, and loneliness. And these behaviors and status can be reflected in the nearby Bluetooth devices count data. And here is an example of Bluetooth data in daily activities, and it shows that Bluetooth data can reflect some changes in several real-world scenarios. Previous related work found negative associations between Bluetooth count data and depression on a small and student-based data set, and they did not consider, they only used the sum of the Bluetooth count data as the Bluetooth features that may lose some nonlinear characteristics of behaviors. So to fill this gap, this study aimed to first extract the statistical Bluetooth features and then propose some novel nonlinear Bluetooth features to reflect the individual's life rhythms and nonlinear behaviors. And then we explored the associations between Bluetooth features and depression. And we also attempt a suitable machine learning methods to predict the severity of depression by extracted Bluetooth feature. And the radar-based platforms scanned the number of the other Bluetooth devices in participants' physical proximate once every hour. And the number of the nearby Bluetooth devices was recorded and uploaded to our platform. And here is two 14 days Bluetooth sequences from the same participant at the different depression status, and the PHQ-8 score of left figure is less than 10 points, and the PHQ-8 score of right figure is greater than 10. So it can demonstrate that this participant has low amount and variance of the Bluetooth sequence when he or she in a depressive status. We extracted several Bluetooth features, including statistical features, entropy features, frequency domain features in the 14 days intervals. And for the statistical-based features, we first calculate for daily features. They are maximum, minimum, mean, and standard deviation on each day's Bluetooth data. And then for each daily feature, we calculated the second order features over 14 days to describe the variance and the amount and the distribution of the Bluetooth sequence over that period. And we also use the multi-scale entropy to measure the complexity and the regularity of the Bluetooth signals over a range of time scales. We set the time scales from 1 to 24 hours, and then we also extract some frequency domain features. We applied the fast Fourier transformation to transfer the Bluetooth sequence from time domain to the frequency domain. And in the frequency domain, the power around 1 circle per day can represent the circadian rhythms of the movement. And we manually define 3 frequency intervals to represent the long-term rhythms, circadian rhythms, and short-term rhythm respectively. And we calculate the percentage of power of these 3 frequency intervals as the frequency domain features in this study. And then we performed a series of pairwise association analysis to find the associations between each Bluetooth feature and the PH2A score. And then for the prediction model, we use the hierarchical Bayesian linear regression model. This model has some advantages, including considering both the individual level and the population level information. And in this study, the data we use are temporal data, so the future data should not use to predict the past data. So we applied 2 time series cross-validation strategies to evaluate the model performance. There is 2 strategies for the time series cross-validations, and they are leave all out and the leave one out strategies. And the associations between Bluetooth and depression can be summarized as when the depression symptom worsened 1 or more following changes were seen in preceding 14 days Bluetooth sequence. The amount and variance of the sequence decreased, and the periodicity, especially the circadian rhythms, decreased, and the sequence of the Bluetooth data become more irregular. And the hierarchical Bayesian linear model achieved the best performance compared with some common used machine learning method. So that shows this model is suitable for longitudinal data analysis. There are also some limitations. First, the hourly Bluetooth data resolution may cause some loss of dynamic information loss. So we may need to consider to increase the Bluetooth data resolution in future research. And the MAC address and the types of Bluetooth devices were not recorded due to the private issues. So some of the contextual information may also lost. We can find some solutions such as use the hash MAC address in future research. And in this study, the hierarchical Bayesian model only explored the linear relationships. So we will also try to explore the nonlinear relationships in future research. Then I will discuss some findings in our analysis about the depression and location data. Depressed people have lower mobility than non-depressed people was found in a number of previous studies, both in survey-based study and mobile health studies. And for the longitudinal relationship, that is the temporal directions of relationships. Bi-directional relationship between depression and mobility was reported in several studies, in several survey-based studies, and it indicated that the change in mobility associated with the subsequent changes in depression, and vice versa. However, related phone-based studies or mobile health studies are limited. So this study aimed to first test existing mobility features and propose some additional mobility features, including the nonlinear features on our large multi-center dataset. And then we plan to test the longitudinal relationship between mobility and depression over time. The radar-based platform collected location data through GPS and network sensors in mobile phones. The longitude and latitude coordinators was measured through these providers every 10 minutes, and for private policy, the raw location data were obfuscated. And we extracted several existing mobility features, and we also proposed some novel features in this study, including the residential location count feature that reflecting the traveling. And we also proposed some frequency domain features to describe the life rhythms of mobility in real-world settings. And similar to Bluetooth features, we also extract several frequency domain features to reflect the periodicity of mobilities of individuals. We used the dynamic structure equation model in this study, and this study has some advantages, and it can handle unequal observation intervals and can handle missing observations, and it can measure the longitudinal relationship between two outcomes, and it also can assess the correlations between them. And here is the diagrams of the dynamic structure equation model, and the directions of relationships and the correlations can be both measured at the within individual level, and the individual difference, such as the age, gender, and work status, can be considered at the between individual levels. And the correlations of the results can be summarized as the phone drive mobility was negatively correlated with depression severity, and the longitudinal relationship can be summarized as the features of homestay, location entropy, and residential location count significantly affect the subsequent PHQ-8 score. And on the other hand, the PHQ-8 score has a significant and negative impact on the features of the period rhythms of the subsequent 14 days. And the limitations are, first, we do not have the raw location data, so some contextual information may be lost. And in this paper, we only use the simple dynamic structure model, that is the first order model, and we will try some more complex and high order bigger models in future research, and the frequency domain features and the frequency intervals are based on our variants and manually defined, which need more explorations in future research. And this result demonstrated that the use of the mobile technologies to monitor depression in real-world settings, and we will try some other types of data such as the accelerations, heart rate, and battery levels to find their associations with depression. And we will also try to combine the features from different data types of data and to perform the multimodal analysis. And we will also try some machine learning or deep learning models to predict the depression severity by these features. And the missing data is a common challenges in mobile health studies, and it can caused by both technical issues and participant engagement, and we need to overcome it. And the individual difference and some confounders such as the lockdown and restrictions during the COVID-19, and some medicines such as the sleeping pills need to be considered as confounder variables. And these challenges need to be overcome in our future research. And that's all for today's presentation. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Yep. Thank you for the interesting talk. I just have one small question. Did you also look at a combination from the Bluetooth data together with location or movement data? So because I could imagine if you see a participant has a high PHQ-8 score, but not so many Bluetooth devices around him or her, could mean that he or she just stays at home. It could also mean that they go outside, so they are mobile, but they just go to places where there are no other Bluetooth devices, for example. So is that something that you put together also in your models?
Yeah, it's a very good suggestions, and we consider it before. And it's in our future plan. The reason we did not perform that is there is some issues to be handled. For example, there are some data missingness, and we need to align the data. But it is indeed good suggestions, and we need in our research plan. Thank you.
Thanks, I really enjoyed the talk. This might become quite a complex question, but it's about causality and how you measure the outcome. You were quite careful to how you described causality and the temporal relationship, the need for things that happen before the outcome, the exposures needs to happen before the outcome. You said specifically that there was a bidirectional relationship in the third study, but you could argue that that's true in the first two as well. So poor sleep can lead to depression, but also depression can lead to poor sleep. Your questionnaire referred to depression in the preceding 14 days. So when you're looking at these sleep measures that are happening through time, are you looking at the sleep causing the depression, or could it be the depression leading to the sleep? And how do you disentangle that? I guess it has something to do with the time period that the outcome is measured over. I know that you didn't design the studies, you're analysing the data, but an interesting challenge about working out causality when you're measuring two things that vary through time.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. And this also in our future plan. And in our third project, we use the DSEM model to find the cross-lag effects that leads the relationship over time. And we will also try this model on sleep data and Bluetooth data. Yeah, in the current research, our aim is to find the correlations, that is the behaviors that reflect the depression status. Yeah. That's definitely in our future plans. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I'm Jacob Andrews from University of Nottingham. It's really interesting to think about the application of this and how it could be applied. And I wondered in particular about the Bluetooth connections. And I wonder, because when we're thinking about the application, it would be fantastic if we could detect as early as possible when a change was taking place. Obviously, PHQ-8 relies on reflecting back over a 2-week time period, and self-report measures tend to be that way. But with this passive data recording, we can perhaps, predict or take an early detection of something. And I wondered if there was anything in your data, or you could tell from your data when that change in someone's condition was starting. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for your comment. That's very good suggestion. That I think for your suggestions, we can use some abnormality detection algorithm to detect some to use some normal patterns when their PHQ-8 score is in a normal depressive state at the training set, and we can train the patterns of the normal status of this participant, and when there is some abnormality or some big change in this status, we can define this as early as possible. It's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the presentations and all the questions. We are running a bit late, but we are going to have a short break. We will be back here in about 10 minutes, a bit less. So at 10:40, we restart. Yeah.
7 minutes. Nice. Yeah. Work out all the preventative to actually get I went to lost the Richard and Amos going back. That's why English is the one who's speaking, and that's the product manager for me. So you should ask them. Saying that I've been changing it in response. It's weird. It makes it for like 6 years. I also think that the last year. Well, it's funny that called next week. Well, we could have hoped that it would be in person, but it's just got to this. But I think Gillian, who
use Toronto. That's just
I'm just going to go around.
with her not being able to be there, it's always going to have to be hybrid for the panel, and then which is a shame. No, we only have two in a 5-year period, so this is the second of the two. The next thing after that. How are you doing? Very well, thanks. Just saying to Rich, it was great to see it all.
Yeah.
On the show.
You must do, yeah.
So, seeing Grover.
Hey, Ross.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to say hi.
Slides are lacking a bit.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, it's all about. university.
Yeah.
A lot of university stuff is
And then I think it's not that bad because I won't be able to install the whole stack in 1
the
hour.
time, yeah.
And also explain it, so.
Yes, I think yes. Maybe this is just a fishing exercise for written statement. Presentations to
JD something.
Yeah, that's good. Super. Always have that for live demo.
Yeah. Yes. So you do live?
No, he's been cut out of the Netflix. I mean, was locked down, and I'd bothered to check.
I have a 5G hotspot. I'm telling you. Yeah. No, I also tried my hotspot, but actually it doesn't. Yeah. Let me just check it.
That's cool. Yeah, we're just moving from Rosalind onto new Kubernetes deployment of database.
I remember Rosalind. Remember that screwing around with the microphone thing?
It's pretty old. It hasn't changed at all.
I mean,
it's still on like a,
it needs to that graphic, that radar-based graphic really lasted a very long time. Yeah. Yeah, it evolved. It never, like, yeah. It's pretty. I was talking to your customer. I think I saw that poster the last time I saw it. It's like, yeah, that part didn't change. Yeah. Since I saw you last, I had to get 2 presentations a week.
I think we're good. Yours is just setting up. So are you going to? You've got a bio to do the intros. You're going to do that. You're going to just log in. You want mine? I still got the rather long one. Cut it down, but maybe decide what you want to use off that. I need to change the log out for that, so it's not. If it turns off, I'll do that.
Actually, this is the only one we can.
So how's all of us going?
It's no longer young. It's
Okay, I'm going to chase everyone.
So, what's the sort of horizon for it?
They're hoping it's a longitudinal version.
Kind of thing, right, yeah.
So I mean, the oldest participant has been there for 5.5 years, which is right about when I left Northwestern. So that's a long time. But it's,
and what about your kind of remote monitoring, the mobile health kind of component? Is that sort of a snapshot?
well, it was Zeal. I refocused into that.
Sure.
The reality is that the scale that we're doing it, the resolution that you're talking about here isn't. It's not today something that is even imaginable. The expectation is that we're going to get a core set of base data, and the researchers are going to propose research questions for sub-cohorts in the program. The problem is these cohorts have been around for 5 or 6 years now, so some of them aren't even like active participants anymore. Then there's this core set of people that joined immediately when the program started that logs in like every week. And so when you have 400,000 people, that's still a lot of people. So as a couple weeks ago, we got IRB approval to basically create like a labs cohort within the program. And so the next couple of years, the plan is to basically push out a range of these little small sub-cohort studies that do specifically this kind of work. And I think the reality is that this is the talking about here is that we're not going to build these tools, we're going to use the tools ourselves. The hard part is, context. Yeah, so the question I'm hoping I can talk to you guys about later is do you feel like it's at a point now where it's good enough for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think. No, totally. I think. I mean, probably the 2 best people would be Calvin and Yatharth, who've been good at things. I mean, that's the closest we've kind of come to in real terms for that kind of data. it's not without challenge. So, I mean, even with the data we've analysed so far, okay, we've got all the, we've pulled down all those intraday time series, but actually using it is, for that scale, is kind of yeah, we went through all that summaries first, so yeah, I mean there's good signal on that. So we've been busy basically. When we come back to look at a subset of that data covering groups of interest, the slides may be getting under 20,000. Over 20,000. Should make it right. I just saw the image from
just gonna
I'll change the
yeah. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to restart. So now Joris is going to present next. He has a background in mathematics and computer science in the University of Utrecht. He also has a PhD in multi-scale computing from the University of Amsterdam. And at the Hive, he's the lead architect for Redabase, already also for a long time, 5 years. And what he will present now is deploying and configuring Redabase with Kubernetes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, welcome everybody. So I've been working on a lot of the parts of Redabase. I've been thinking a lot about the concepts behind Redabase, but this talk, it's very technical. It's really about deploying with Kubernetes. So if you're less technically inclined, maybe it will be slightly boring, but you'll learn something about the infrastructure and how to run a platform like this. Right, so we've seen the basic graphs of Redabase. Usually what people want to see is, okay, you have some apps, you have some APIs, and the platform just does its thing. And then on the other side, you have some monitoring. You get the data out. And that's kind of what you want from the platform. On the operations side of things, this is a lot more complicated because you have all of these different components in there. So this figure is actually a bit old because it's using Docker. We used to use Docker Compose to deploy all our systems. Everything would run with a single Docker Compose file, and you would run all of your services, either on a single computer or with some work, you could use multiple computers. Well, on the left side, we still have this API. So this is the same that Nevedka showed. You have data coming in via proxy. Then all of the data goes through Apache Kafka. Well, it can go in directly from the phone to the REST proxy, or it can go via this API to some connectors. So the nice thing about API, it's really like this middleware that stores all of the data, but you can get data in via multiple routes, and you can also get data out via multiple routes. So again, we have multiple sync connectors to multiple different storage solutions. And also we have some additional analytics that can run on the fly. Whenever new data comes in, you get a new result. What happened with this Docker Compose stack is it just grew bigger and bigger, but it also became less organized. We saw that, well, Helvetica showed there was 45 use cases, and, well, probably as many installations of Radarbase. So then you have all these different parts that could be used for these different deployments. And there wasn't really a way to distinguish what are you using for this deployment, how are you going to use it. On top of that, we had to do a lot of scripting to get Docker Compose to do what we wanted, because Docker Compose is just meant to start up some services, but you want to have additional services maybe, we have some additional dashboard, or you want to have a regular output generation. You have to put a script on top of that. You have to do certificate renewal for your HTTPS certificates. That's another services that's running elsewhere. I have all these services on top of Docker Compose. It just became unmanageable. So this is when we started to look for other solutions. I think this was in 2019 when we went for the Radar AD project. I know that KCL, you've explored Terraform for quite a bit because this matched quite well with the infrastructure that you were running, like this big machines on Roslyn. Another option we're looking at is Docker Swarm. So this is another way to put your containers on different places. But we saw that the trend in industry was to really move towards Kubernetes. So we thought, well, let's try and see if this works for us. We also got a new person involved, so Kevan Hidayati, also at the Hive, who had quite some experience with Kubernetes. So he brought us on board with that evaluation. So, first, this is the first part that has command line things on it. So what Kubernetes does is it manages a set of containers, but it tries to keep the state that you specify. So what you would do is you would say, I want to run these 3 services. And then you will give it some nodes, you will give it some storage capacity, and then Kubernetes will figure out where to put those services, so on which computer will I put it, and which storage will I allocate. The only thing you have to do is say, I want you to run this, and it will run it for you. So this is done with a YAML specification. Each resource in Kubernetes, it's modeled as an API. Everything is a resource. Each resource has a YAML specification, and Kubernetes just tries to fulfill that specification. Each resource also has a name, and that's unique to its type. So you have different types like nodes, pods, deployments, stateful sets. You have a lot. You can add more custom things to Kubernetes as well. Each of those have a YAML specification and a name. And then other resources can refer to that. So you can have, for example, a pod. This is one container that's running a single service. And it will refer to a deployment. And then that deployment will say, well, if I want to have a Postgres database, I want a master, I want 3 slaves, and that gets translated into pods. So you will have 1 master pod, 3 slave pods. All of that is then configured by this one plugin. How you then configure everything is you use these verbs to interact with the resources. So one that you will start with usually is config use context. So here, as I say, I want to use the context radar K3S test. The context is basically the cluster that you're connecting to. So at the Hive, we'll have like maybe 10 contexts we can choose from, and once you choose the right context, you're communicating with the right cluster. You can get the nodes, so you can say, how many nodes do I have? Usually we start with 3, but you can also just have one node, deploy everything on a single node. You won't get the high availability, that's part of Kubernetes, but you will have Kubernetes to manage all of the resources. So that's nodes. Then the pods, as I said, are the individual containers. So just like one master node or one slave. What you can do is, well, you can get pods, so you know what's running, what's not running. You can also describe pods, which is very useful. This is just what state does Kubernetes think this pod is in. So it can be running, initializing, crashing, whatever. It will tell you, okay, this is the current state. Healthy is, of course, the state we want it to be in. You can edit everything in line. So all of these resources are just YAML resource. You can edit it with the editor. And Kubernetes will try to change things. So if you edit a deployment, you might say, I want to use a new version of this container. So I want to use the latest Postgres. It will start up all these new Postgres processes. It will wait until they're live. And in the background, actually, all of the old processes are still running. So you won't have downtime or very little downtime. It will just keep running the services and try to fulfill whatever you specify. Then something that's quite similar to deployments, slightly different, is deployments. Specify something that's running anywhere. In stateful sets, you want the service to run on a certain node with a certain persistent volume, so with some persistent storage. So with a stateful set, you say, I want everything to remain static because probably I have a service that can't deal with relocating, or I have a service that should be close to its data. So for example, Kafka brokers, they're all part of the stateful set. They're not part of the deployment. But for example, the management portal, that would be a deployment. And most of the services we have running. Something that, so I've just listed some commands we use quite often. So one is rollout restart. This will restart a service without downtime, without significant downtime. It will just start up a new service and then wait until it's live and then tear down the old service. And then scale we use quite often as well. You can say I want to have more replicas of the same service. Like I'm seeing that my gateway, my ingress is getting overloaded. I'm getting too many requests. So you can say, well, I want to scale it to have more replicas, and then it will just start up new containers on different nodes and try to balance that a little bit. Yeah, and then finally, one that's not really specific to any resources is apply. You can take any specification and just apply it, and it will, from the specification, read what's the resource type, what do you want to do. So next part. So this was all compute-based. Then there's also storage. So you have persistent volume claims. You request some storage. You want it to be fixed on a certain location. And that's quite useful as like an abstraction. But in the end, it still depends on the infrastructure you're running on. So Google has a different implementation of this storage than OpenStack, and your local machine has another implementation than Amazon. So although Kubernetes, it has quite some abstractions, at some point you're down to what does the infrastructure provide, and that differs between the different infrastructure providers. So you have a claim. This is just saying, I have this pod. It wants to have this data, but then the persistent volume is actually the allocation of that storage space. So the claim doesn't have any storage space. It just says, I want to have this data. And then the volume actually says, this is the data. Then there's two types of read-only storage. This is the config map and the secrets. In config map, you can mount config files, and the containers can read them. So this is quite useful to configure your cluster. And then with secrets, it's kind of similar, but they're kind of more protected than config maps. And on the networking side, all of these containers and deployments, they have services. So this defines how can you access this service or this container. The cluster IP means it's only accessible within the cluster, and this is most services in Radar Kubernetes use this. But there's also load balancer where you say, okay, you can access this from the internet, and the only service we have right now that does that is our Nginx or our web server. This can be accessed from the internet, and all the others are just accessed by proxy from the Nginx, from the web server. What's useful here is that you can also have a headless service, so you can say, well, I don't know how many replicas I will have running at any given time, but I can just put a DNS entry that points to the replicas that I have running at the current moment. And then, yeah, at runtime, you can see which replicas are actually in run. Then you have ingress. So this is just a TCP port. This is just, you can access it. And with ingress, you say, well, you can also access it via internet. So you have HTTP specification. This path or this DNS entry maps to this service. Yeah, and then finally certificates. We use Let's Encrypt, but you can also provide your own SSL certificates if you want. Next up is Helm. So with Kubernetes, we saw it's very flexible. You just have resources with YAML, and you have a cluster that does everything for you. But what we saw as well, you don't just want one resource to run a service. You want several resources. You want deployment, you want a service, you want an ingress. So what they did after that is develop Helm, and this is a Golang template engine. So this will combine multiple resources into a single package, and then if you provide it with your input values, it will fill those in, and it will run it on the cluster. So it will apply it to the Kubernetes cluster. Yeah, so from the command line, the first thing you can do is Helm list. So that just lists which Helm charts am I running at this point. You can add repositories. So this is saying, well, this is the Radar base, Radar Kubernetes, or Radar Helm charts. But you can add a lot of different repositories. There are a lot of Helm charts being published. And then you can say, well, what would the Kubernetes resources look like if I give it a certain set of values? So here I just say, well, give me the template for when I apply this. So I give the name management portal. I use this Helm chart in this repository, and then I use a certain version. So this is version control, which is quite useful. And given values. And then you can inspect the resources does this match what I expect to be installed? And then finally, of course, you can also install it. Yeah, Create is useful if you want to have a new service. If you want to develop something on Radar Helm charts, then you can use this one. And then finally, yeah, a part that's, this is part of more the package manager part, as you can say. I have a history for my deployments. So I have Manager Portal installed, then I install a new version, but it turns out it doesn't work, or maybe something's misconfigured, or it turns out I want the old deployment anyway. So I can look at the history and see which deployments have I done, and I can roll back to a specific version history. And then it will start up the old Manager Portal. If something was really wrong with the new management portal, so the specification was just off, it will never have stopped the old management portal, because Kubernetes sees, okay, the new version is not live, I will just keep the old version up. And then if you roll back, it just stops trying to deploy this new version. And what the template actually looks like, so this is this Golang template. You can specify in this is a deployment, which containers am I running? So this is a Docker container. And you can use variables in there, like the chart name. So in this case, it will be management portal. You can provide it with just YAML values. This is the function that's run on this value, and this is then a pipe function. So you have 2 YAML, so it will make a YAML specification, and then you indent it with 4 spaces. And you also have some basic, like if else, you have some for looping. It's quite basic, but it works. I think there's like 60 functions you can use from Golang. Yeah, the next part is, so in Radar, there's going to be 2 parts. One is Radar Helm charts, and this is where we publish all our different components. So that will have the management portal, the app server, everything that's part of Radar base is published then as Radar Helm charts. I see I didn't change this correctly. There's also a CP Helm charts, which is the Confluence images, where we have to do some adaptations to fit it in. So how you interact with this kind of repo, you can search in Helm as well. So once you've imported the repo with this command, you can search it, and you will see all of the Helm charts that are published under this repository. It will also, you can also show the README, so we do try to provide all of the variables that you can enter into this README, and also values, so you know what is configurable, what you can edit to the Helm chart. Yeah, and there's a release per component. So if there's any issues with one of the components that you notice, just you can make a pull request, give a new values for that single component, and it will make a new release for that component. So far, these commands, they run quite interactively. You have to provide it with some values. You have to start up some things. But if we would want to orchestrate everything, you would still need some scripts to make sure that all the components are running and that everything's working as you expect. So there's even a level on top of this, which is called Helm file. And this gives you infrastructure as code. So infrastructure as code, concept that you don't want to do everything manually. You want to have some reproducible installs. You want to make sure that all of the steps that you need to do to make an installation are followed. So this is what Helm Helm file does. It combines all of these Helm charts, the values, the secrets, into a small set of files. You just have to specify those files, and then you have a complete Radar Kubernetes installation. So the first one you can do is Helm file template. If you run that in Radar Kubernetes, you'll get a huge amount of outputs because we have quite some components there and it will be too much. What you can do is provide a selector and say, well, I want to have the template, but only of the management portal, for example. And you can use this selector for all of these commands. So that you apply only for a single service, this Helm file. The next part is Helm file sync. In that case, you apply all of the things that you put in code to the cluster. So this will sync your code with your cluster. We usually use concurrency 1 because there are some interdependencies between the components. So if you're not running a Postgres database, but your service requires a Postgres database, it's just not going to run, and it's never going to be live. So that won't work. So we use concurrency 1 to say, well, first the Postgres database, then the next service. Apply is kind of similar to sync, but it has an extra step where it compares the current value on the cluster to the value that you have on your own configuration values. So it basically does a diff. And if there's no changes, it will just not do anything, which saves a lot of time. One thing that Helm file doesn't do is report on why a sync or apply didn't work. So if you misconfigured something, the pod will not go up, or it will just give you errors. It will never go live. But Helm file doesn't really report on that. It just says, well, I failed to install. But then that doesn't really give you any information. So usually what we do during this process of syncing and applying is then also using kubectl describe to see what is the status of the pod, and kubectl logs to get all of the log messages. This will give you an indication like which parameter was wrong or misconfigured. The Helm file itself looks like this. So on Radar Kubernetes, you can see all of these, but again, it uses Go templating. So it takes some values, and then, like for example, here it says I want to connect to this Kubernetes cluster. So kubecontext will give you the Kubernetes cluster. It gets all of the files from the environments, YAML, the values files. And then the release looks like this. So you have like this management portal. This would be the chart and the version. With installed, you can control for each component if you want to install it or not. So this really gives us much more flexibility in installing different installations and say, well, for this client, we need the Fitbit connector, and for that client, we don't need the Fitbit connector, we just need ingest. For the other one, we just need the upload connector. You have a lot of flexibility in deploying, which was not the case for this Docker Compose stack. So what Radar Kubernetes does is all of the concepts I've explained before, it combines it. So it puts all of the values, all of the secrets, all of the Helm files into one GitHub repository that you could share in principle, and then give you one deployment. So you have the configuration files that you will put in environments.yaml. So you can put a list of multiple configuration files that you want. Then you have a lot of layers in which these configuration files are applied. So sometimes in the Go templating, you can already provide the defaults. So you say, well, if no value is present, then use this value. Then in the chart, you can also say, well, if you have no value for this chart, use this value. And then you have the different files that are used in Radar Kubernetes, which is the base, which we provide, and the production that you as an operator should provide. As an example of other values that we would give, like in EC production, is you would say, well, for the management portal, I want to install it. I want to use this many replicas, so this many copies running at the same time. This is my Postgres, and this is some other configuration values. At the Hive, we do publish also secrets on GitHub, but then we use an additional layer of encryption to actually manage those secrets. But this is, it's really up to you how you do this. If you just have a single operator, you can just put all of these production secrets like in a separate file. You can share it like internally by a different channel. But we try to just keep everything in one repo to keep everything organized. Yeah, so basically we went from this picture, which was the old Docker Compose stack, to a new picture, which is practically similar, but there's some new. So we have some new app services, and it's all run on this stack, including Helm charts, Kubernetes, and Prometheus for the monitoring. A big difference is the configurability. So previously, you were kind of stuck to using the entire infrastructure. Right now, you can pick and choose. Like you don't have to install everything. You can just install Kafka with the Fitbit connector, and you're basically done. So you have much more flexibility in that sense. How much more time do I have?
We've got 10 minutes. So
10 minutes.
We can call 5 of those for questions if you...
Yeah, okay. I think I'll skip most of this. I'll just continue on my previous point. So there's a lot of different Helm files in the Radar Kubernetes directory. Each of those, they just specify a few of the containers. So you have the init container. You always need that because you need to have the Kubernetes setup. You need to have Nginx, so you need to have a web server. Other than that, and this one, even this one is not repeated. There's a separate one for all the Kafka stuff, and the management portal, app server, Fitbit, Grafana, gateway analysis, download, and upload. So, you can pick and choose. In the configuration file, you can just specify install or not install. And so the next part is the actual deployment. So we're quite flexible in that as well. We usually, for clients with traditional VM setups or with small budgets, we would install K3s. So you can install this just on a single node. It runs a Kubernetes cluster as though it would have multiple nodes. You can expand on this. You can install multiple nodes with K3s as well. This we usually use for single node deployments. And you won't get really the high availability because if that node crashes, the cluster is down. But you do get some of the advantage. So all of the manipulation from Kubernetes, that works. Then the next step up is what we usually say. This is our choice. Is EKS, so Amazon Kubernetes Service. This is it's reliable, it's easy to manage. You don't have to fiddle around with networks, like internal networks. You can just use all of the Amazon interface to manage the Kubernetes cluster. We've used this one as well. This one, I think we've tried once, but not really used in production. And this one we have experience with in Radar AD, using OpenStack as a cluster provider, but it's not all positive. It's just there's so much more to manage if you have to operate your own cluster and then operate Kubernetes on top of that. And if you do something for Amazon where they do the cluster management, they install Kubernetes, and if you need to migrate, they have the tools to do it. So I would really advise going either K3S or EKS. And then for other services, actually the same thing goes. So if you have budgets, you can go for something like Confluent Cloud, or I think KCL is going for MSK. So you can go for a commercial Kafka offering. It depends both on your budget and also on your data profile. So if you have a lot of data to stream with very high frequency, then this might be quite expensive. But if you have more low frequency data, it's actually fine to use this. It's not that expensive. And then the same goes for, like, you can use Amazon RDS for your databases instead of installing your own Postgres. You can use Amazon S3 instead of Minio. This will take care of all of the duplication. You can use backups. Everything's managed by Amazon, which is quite easy. So if you're deploying on Amazon, that's also a good choice to use instead of Minio. Now, finally, we do encourage people to get online and start any discussion on Radar Kubernetes. Like in the last time, I think, Amos, you've been quite active there in your thread as well. But, I need to get on more there. But there we can help you with if you try your own deployments. So I would encourage you to do that. Questions?
First, it's amazing to see how far things have come in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
My two questions are, as the services necessary to stand up Radarbase have grown in complexity, and the orchestration has also kind of rise to match that. First question is, how stable is it? And then the second question, I think this is a question that I've wondered for a long time, and usually in the past it's Slack Joris, he knows the answer. How do you teach people to orchestrate a system of systems that has grown this complex?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, for the first part, let's start with the second part. I think this symposium is part of that effort. So we do plan like a follow-up session, more hands-on. But indeed, it is complex to manage something like this. And we do try to teach people to some extent. For some clients, we just have SLAs, and we will manage it for them. But getting to know Kubernetes better, that will really help a lot, because you don't have to have the whole system running to have a functional system. You can, if you have Radar Kubernetes and you have some base services, just those services will like keep working, and then you can add more services as you like. I think that's a good way for people to start, just to install like one base service and say, okay, let me see if I understand everything that happens there, and then build on top of that. I think that's actually easier with this system than with the previous Docker Compose one, because with the previous Docker Compose, you had to install everything, and you have no idea what's going on. Yeah.
I think I can probably also add, I mean, if you just want a complete hands-off option, there are people like the Hive who will do that for you. We also in Kings run this for other projects that we're but also hand off bits of the infrastructure, like the Kafka. Kafka's a beastly thing. It's pretty complicated.
you can hand that off to, as a managed service, so you just consume usage of that. Same thing with S3. So there are bits of complexity you can just sort of brush away a little bit and let something else deal with that. I think that's definitely one option. It'll cost you more. It's more expensive, but it's definitely an option. We're also kind of betting a little bit that the Kubernetes is the thing that people will use going on, and the world will just get better at using Kubernetes as more people kind of get embedded with it.
And just to comment on the robustness, actually we've installed this for a lot of clients. Usually we see that if it's deployed on a commercial cluster like Amazon or Azure, things will just keep running and keep running once it's installed. Like you have some initial pains, of course, everything has to be configured correctly. Once everything's configured, it just runs. And this is slightly different for these OpenStack deployments where people do it in-house, because then you see, the clusters being migrated. One of the data servers went down and they don't have a backup. And things like this, you get, this is a pain. But I think this is a pain for any deployment on this kind of system.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So this might be a question for you and a few others. In the event that there's some sort of partner dependency, like on Fitbit, where the data quality or data connections may go down, how robust is the overall system at recovering data in those cases?
I think that's really a question for the individual, like Fitbit service. Okay, I guess moderately. So we have some services that you can like refetch data, historical data for certain individuals. So if you see that data is missing, or you see that the connection was lost, you can just like restart that data collection for that person. And because everything's stored on the Fitbit cloud, you still have access to all of that data. It's hard to answer in general. Yeah.
Is there any plans to support things like Customize for a multi-deployment to the same Kubernetes cluster, to change the namespaces in a consistent manner based on a tenancy?
Right. We do use multiple namespaces. I think it's not completely configurable at this point. I mean, I welcome innovation on this point, up to the point that it doesn't make things more complex. So I think we start with a slightly more complex setup and then reduce the complexity again, because we saw this is going to be too much.
But a method of deployment could be to use Helm file to get the templates and then apply Customize to the templates.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, if I can have a second question, I guess the other one is, to what level do you not run as root, and is there any vulnerability scanning as part of the product, and is there a feedback loop to address vulnerabilities in Docker containers? You can come back to me on that one.
Yeah, sure. Well, we do a lot of vulnerability scanning on the individual Docker containers. So that's what we do. We don't have a scan on the full cluster usually, although Azure does provide something like that. So that again depends a bit on the infrastructure. All right. Thank you.
No, I stopped it. It's like 3. One of the how that all links together. There's like one picture that makes it introduce the second. So here, just make changes. Just three.
Just to share his screen.
So we literally have to check.
Payment, can you hear us?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we don't see
okay.
your slides, but I think...
you couldn't see the slides.
I think we need to share screen, Amos.
Next steps.
Mm-hmm.
We can swap the sessions, I guess. You try that.
Yeah, I think we are not in the link anymore to connect again.
Should I get the winner?
Maybe, yeah.
We can start.
Yeah. Your side. We have technical issues. Just 2 minutes. Oh. Yeah.
You want to share this?
So it's still
Because you're also using Docker.
Can you hear us? We are all good now.
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Thank you and apologies.
No problem, no problem. May I start?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome everyone. This is Payman from The Hive. I'm a software engineer at The Hive for almost 2 years. And here I will present a short introduction about the features of the ARMT application, which is the questionnaire app in the Radarbase platform. The ARMT application is the active remote monitoring technologies app, which is provided by Radarbase to collect the active data, such as, for example, the questionnaires about mood, medication intake, and other questionnaires type. The data that is collected by the ARMT application is in the structured formats passed to the Radarbase platform for any further analysis and investigations. The first version of the application was published in August 2018, and the latest version is published on February 2022, which is almost 20 days ago. The technology that we used to develop the ARMT application is Ionic framework, which is we programmed the application with the Angular and use Apache Cordova. The app supported on both Android and iOS platforms, and the application is available on Play Store and App Store, and the source code is also available on Radarbase repository. The main features that I want to talk very shortly here, as I said, it supports on both Android and iOS. We simply can configure and customize questionnaires. We have multiple question input types. We can connect to Firebase for cloud messaging and also analytics. We support multiple languages in this application, and also in the latest version, we support also the audio capturing and audio questionnaires. In this application, we have 3 types of questionnaires or tasks. The main one are scheduled tasks, clinical tasks, and on-demand tasks. For the scheduled questionnaire, we can set it or schedule it for different times, for example, in hourly, daily, or weekly basis. And also for each scheduled questionnaire, we have notification that comes from the Firebase. Alongside that we have notifications, we can set reminders for missed notifications or questionnaire that the user missed, and set it also, for example, some minutes later to the notification. And for clinical and on-demand questionnaires, we have sort of the tasks that we can set it to be filled in the clinic or filled in by the user whenever he or she wants. The app also supports the fully customizable introduction and thank you page. And it supports multiple input types that I will go very shortly in each of them. It supports audio tasks that capture audio from the user and send it to the platform. It supports descriptive and information tasks, for example, tasks with only text or text with images. It supports checkboxes for multiple choice answers, radio for single choice answers, and matrix radio. It also supports some sort of range questions, range info questions, and sliders. These are all single answer questions. And it supports also multiple input types, for example, text, date, time, and also it supports time tasks, which is something like a stopwatch and let the user to know when to start the task and when to finish the task. And in the latest version, we implement App Launcher to launch an external app that supports deep linking. For configuring and customizing the questionnaires, we support conditional logics or branching logic. This is based on the previous answers. You can show or hide a question based on the answer from the previous questions. It also supports or and conditions to customize the behavior of branching logic. In the connection to Firebase, it supports Firebase cloud messaging, analytics, remote config for configuring the app based on different platforms, and also use the A/B testing. In collecting data, we use the we stored the data in the app and then send it as a distributed message named Kafka. For each topic, we used the same schema for all questionnaires, but for each project or each data questionnaire, we use different topic. This is a screenshot from the output results that we can, for example, see these are all different topics that all the data is stored there by a CSV file, and the CSV file is something like this. You can see all the questions and answers with the value and timestamps that generated by the app and sent to the Kafka, sent in the Kafka message to the platform. This is the short introduction, the main features of the ARMT app. And I would be happy if you have any questions to ask.
Any questions on the Active app? Okay, so we've got a session of lightning talk, so I think we will move directly on to the next talk. So we have Joris again. Oh, sorry. Please apologise. So, either one is fine. I think that one's on the. I think that's okay.
Okay. So we have to. Where's the dash?
She set it up before, so.
Need to connect again.
Yes, this one's
Yes. Okay. Yeah, right. Maybe I'll start. So I didn't prepare a full presentation for this. On the last moment, discovered this. So I'll just tell a bit about the PRMT app. So the PRMT app is the passive remote monitoring app, which will, on the background of an Android phone, collect data. So that will be metrics from the mobile phone itself, so its acceleration, its location, the Bluetooth, for example, also that was shown in the keynote. All of that will just be collected in the background. Then people that use the PRMT app, they can configure it to whatever sensors they want to be included in their study. And also the frequency. Like if you use location data, you need to be very careful not to over-ask the amount of location data, because the battery will just drain very fast and people will uninstall the app. The interface, I think this is a bit older interface, but the gist is still the same. You have a number of devices, and you can see whether it's connected or searching or not doing anything. We've seen when we started, there was quite a lot of devices that provided a Bluetooth SDK, so you could easily interface with those devices over Bluetooth. As time went on and more consumer devices were being used, most of those consumer devices don't provide an SDK, so you can't connect directly to them, but you have to use the cloud to fetch the data. So this app has become more about just fetching data from the phone itself rather than peripherals. It's meant to use a plugin system. So if you use the version that's on the App Store, you will get most of the functionality. You won't get, let's see, the SMS and like the text and phone records, because the Google Play Store doesn't allow that. If you absolutely need to monitor like the amount of SMSs people are using, the amount of phone calls, then you have to distribute your own version of the app. It won't go through by the App Store. We have another repository. So this repository is really just for building the app. It doesn't include any of the plugins. It just says, well, I need this set of plugins. So if I go to the app and then the build, we'll say, well, I'm using these versions or these plugins right now. So that's a phone usage. There's a number. If you want to make any changes to plugins, well, first of all, you can develop your own plugin, like completely separate of the Raiderbase ecosystem. You could develop your own and just plug it in there as well. But if you want to do something that also contributes to Raiderbase, then you can go to Radar Commons Android, and this contains a list of plugins. So these are the plugins. Most of them are fully developed, and I think a few of them are more like in experimental phases. But yeah, things that are really running on the phone, that would be the application status, the telephony, so that's SMS and calls, Radar Android phone, so that's all of the sensors, so acceleration, location, I think is also on there, Bluetooth. Phone usage, this again is a bit controversial. I wouldn't be surprised if Google takes it out of the Play Store as well. This plugin, this monitors which apps you're using on the phone. So this could give you an idea, like, is someone using more communication apps or more other apps. And the weather app, that just triggers a call to weather API, and from your current location, you get the weather without necessarily transmitting your actual location to the server. Yeah, for this, it works quite similar to the PRMT app in the sense that it's just you scan the QR code, you're good to go. Something we developed in addition is a configuration app, because we wanted all the researchers to be able to specify their own protocol and their own way of collecting data via the PRMT app. There's this configuration management where you can just add your own parameters. So you can say plugins, and then you just want to add the Empatica. So if you do that, you publish it. And the app config service will now say, okay, it will only use the Empatica plugin. You won't get any phone data, just the Empatica. Or you can choose phone, you can use acceleration, whatever you want. You can specify it in here. And that makes the version on the App Store very configurable for users, because you don't have to publish your own. You can fully configure it in your own installation. You don't need access to our Firebase or whatever. You don't need us to configure it. Yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Well, thanks for that. I was just wondering, when you've got the ARMT app, which is triggering something like a walking test, where that's doing the countdown, but actually the data is coming from an internal sensor, either a phone or an attachment. Is that a wearable? Is that are the two apps connected to each other?
I'm not sure about the walking test actually, but if the two apps are running simultaneously, they'll both just keep the same timestamp, but I think they won't have like a session ID or something attached to it. Like, we also see apps that have a test like that. They will create a session ID and say like this is my test ID or whatever, or this is my visit, and then you can easily combine the two. But in this case, you will just have to use the timestamps to make sure that those are matched.
Okay, so the passive app is constantly monitoring someone's walking, and then
exactly
time walking test just takes a timestamp.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Two questions, if I may. The first one is, what about consent, and how does the patient or person know what's going on?
Right. So when you first open the app, you get a consent screen, basically, and it does describe all of the variables that are collected. Usually, it's part of another, like a setup for your trial, and they will give consent, as part of that trial. So the consent inside the app is kind of additional, but the actual consent is usually given to the researcher.
So just on that point, the platform is actually integrated with RedCap in there. That's got an in-consent module, or you can write your consent into that.
But I guess you can change the config here, and it'll change on the phone. And I guess the consent model is external to the app, is what you're really saying.
Yeah, that's right. Because the app, it could, collect everything. For example, location data, as we heard in the previous talk, it is like kind of offset to kind of have a semi-privacy there. Things like phone numbers, they're hashed, so you can't retrieve them. But it's a limitation.
And I guess the second one is iOS is obviously not supported. There is a GitHub project from 2 years ago that did try to move it forwards. Is that dead? Does it need funding? Is it on the roadmap?
I think Julia will talk about the roadmap, but we see severe limitations. So the only thing that we could reliably get was health kit data. And even there, it's kind of questionable whether the Apple Store will even allow an app like this to get entered. So it's not completely clear at this point. What's the way forward?
No, it's a massive untapped segment of the population, isn't it? And some communities like multiple sclerosis are 60, 70, 80% iOS. So I guess it's biased in the population.
Yeah. No, that's true. And we see in some trials people use their own phones, and other they get phones from the researchers.
It's challenging. If you have a study where you want passive data from both brain systems, how do you kind of reconcile that downstream as well? It's going to be super complicated. They'll look very, very different in data sets. So our next speaker is Pauline. She's a computer scientist from UCL. Is working in King's College London in the Pilot Lab group. Her responsibilities are mostly around developments of the
Hi, everyone. So in this talk, I'm going to be talking about visualizing radar-based data through real-time dashboards. So to summarize, I'm going to be giving an introduction, a history of our different dashboards in radar-based, the motivation for the new version of the dashboard and the solution, the main components, architecture, use cases, and limitations and future features. So dashboards are helpful in many ways. So first of all, they give an overview of data. So because in Radarbase, we have large data sets constantly being sent to the platform. So they're very helpful in showing a big picture of the data, whether this is on a participant level or on a project level. It's also good in monitoring because it provides a preview of data and the data completeness. It provides an easy way for researchers to monitor participant engagement, so if they're wearing their devices, and contact them if there are issues in wearing those devices. Not only does it help monitor participant engagement, it also helps so the software developers to monitor our platform. So if there are issues with data collection and data, we can see in the dashboard that data is not coming into the platform. It could be that the participant isn't wearing the device, or there might be technical issues in the platform itself. And it can also give a pre-analysis, so it bridges the gap between raw data and actual data analysis. So we have a preview of what of the initial information that can be gathered from the dashboards. So a bit of background on the Radar-based platform. I think this was already discussed a bit earlier. So the core component of the platform is Kafka. So we use Apache Kafka as a messaging system, and it can be used to send data from one application to another. So we use Kafka topics. Kafka topics are virtual groups of partitions across Kafka brokers in the cluster, and data can be sent to these topics, and data can also be consumed from these topics. So in Radar-based, data from the devices are streamed into the topics, and these topics are usually, for example, a single data stream like Fitbit heart rate. And then this data can then be sent to storage or to a database. So the history of the dashboard. So first we had the initial dashboard, so version 1. So this leveraged Kafka streams that loaded data into MongoDB. So that's what it looked like, but it was never used. So it used an Angular front end to pull data from MongoDB through a REST API, and we used D3.js for visualizations. So the disadvantage, so this is the architecture. So the data streams are sent to Kafka, and then the data is loaded onto MongoDB, which the REST API uses as a resource, and then the dashboard pulls the data from the REST API. So the disadvantage of this dashboard was the Kafka streams were too process CPU and memory heavy for the purpose of compliance monitoring. And also, if additional streams were needed, then the code had to be constantly extended to support this. So which, in turn, like we had a new version 2 of the dashboard. So this used Grafana. This was visualized through Grafana, and this was used for Radar CNS compliance monitoring. So basically, the data from the storage, the scripts were used. Scripts were run to pull the data from the storage and load it onto TimescaleDB, which was visualized through Grafana. So this was the architecture. So the data streams were sent to Kafka, and then the data from the Kafka were sent to the storage. The Python scripts were run daily to pull data from the storage and loaded into TimescaleDB, and which was used as a data source for the Grafana dashboard. So the disadvantage of this was the scripts were run daily to load data into the database, and also data was taken from the storage, which also added to the delay. So the motivation and solution. So what the goal, we wanted the dashboard to be flexible, scalable, and real-time. So flexible, we wanted the dashboard components to be applicable and usable in multiple studies. We wanted to be scalable. We wanted to make it easier when more and larger data sets needed to be visualized, and real-time, or at least near real-time. So we wanted to visualize the data to allow quick and efficient data monitoring. So we used key components from both the first version of the dashboard and the second version of the dashboard to develop a new pipeline for data visualization. So similar to the version 1, we leverage Kafka. So data from the Kafka topics are immediately connected to a Kafka sync connector, which exports these data to a TimescaleDB database. And similar to version 2, we leverage existing Grafana dashboarding tools with TimescaleDB as the data source. So we wanted to improve the mechanisms of the data flow into Grafana to allow it to be more scalable, generalizable, and more real-time. So we used the Kafka features already in place to do direct mapping from the Kafka topics using a TimescaleDB connector to a TimescaleDB database, which becomes the data source for the Grafana dashboards. As I mentioned, so the main components, there are 3 main components to this. There is the Kafka connector. So this allows the export of data from the Kafka topics, which the data streams are sent to any JDBC database. In this case, TimescaleDB. We extended the connector to support our requirements, supporting TimescaleDB, for example. And the next component is the TimescaleDB database. This is a time series SQL database. This is used to store data from the Kafka topics, which is then used as a data source for Grafana. And finally, the Grafana dashboard, which is the front end, and this is the open source visualization web application. And the data sources, for example, TimescaleDB in our case, can be connected to the application, which allows the transformation of the data into visualizations, which are customizable. So the architecture of this dashboard. So in the version 2, this was the architecture. So, and what we changed was instead of the timescale Python scripts, we just connected the Kafka topics directly to timescale DB with a connector. So data streams are sent to Kafka, which is connected to a timescale DB connector, which sends data to timescale DB, and this is visualized through the Grafana dashboard. So use cases. So currently, it is being used in Radar AD for compliance monitoring. So the goal in Radar AD is making sure the participants are wearing their Fitbit devices and using the PRMT app for the 8-week duration of the study. So this is currently being used to monitor Fitbit wear time at the bottom and the PRMT record count at the top. So they currently show data completeness from the Tier 1 data sources, which is PRMT, Fitbit, and also from an active data source, which is the Altoida application. So there are a few limitations currently because upon installation, we only have specific types of visualizations like the PRMT and the Fitbit wear time, but more visualizations will be added in the future for wider use cases. However, users are also able to customize their own dashboard currently using their own dashboard JSON file or through the Grafana UI. The dashboards can also be quite slow when querying large data sets because complete high-frequency data is constantly being sent to timescale DB as opposed to pre-processed aggregation. Although timescale DB has performance improvements because it's made for time series data. So for future features, we can have we might want to add aggregations of streams to improve dashboard performance and to support large data sets. So we can pre-aggregate these streams and then send them to timescale DB. We might do this through KSQLDB, and KSQLDB is a database for building stream processing applications on top of Apache Kafka. That's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Any questions on the dashboards?
Thank you. I was just curious, did you consider using Prometheus as a database instead of time series? Did you look at that option?
I don't think we looked into that option because we were just trying to improve the existing mechanism that we had. We were already using Grafana, so we wanted to continue using Grafana. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you. Jacob Andrews from University of Nottingham. I'm just wondering, with Grafana, how customizable it is and whether there's potential for visualizations from Grafana to be fed back into for example, the ARMT app, so that users themselves can see their own data visualized, and as well the visualizations that you showed in your slideshow there, although they might be meaningful for researchers, for clinicians, you may need a slightly different dashboard, perhaps for slightly different data. I wondered, again, how customizable is Grafana for those sorts of purposes? Thank you.
It might be a bit difficult to feedback Grafana into the actual apps for the users because we need to create more. We need to create a service on top of pulling the data from timescale DB. But yeah, we're currently looking into adding more visualizations to feedback into participants.
It should be in principle possible to build that on top of the time series database. So yeah, that may well come with the roadmap. One more question.
My one question is, who decides what gets displayed in Grafana for a specific research project?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, who decides how Grafana is configured for a specific research project?
How Grafana is configured?
Yeah, who configures the UI in Grafana for a specific project?
Oh, for this case, we work with the data analysts and what their requirements is, and then we just configure it according to the requirements.
Thanks. Yes, so thanks for the talk again. Mike Craven from University of Nottingham and the Radar CNS project. So I was interested to think about, maybe a trial manager using this. Is there anything else that you think that they might want in addition to be able to see? I suppose you get a snapshot of individual users and maybe where data's dropped, or so you've got an idea of completeness. I don't know, are there things that trial managers like to know, like presumably overall percentages of data completeness, or so can the system provide that sort of some statistics in addition to the visualization of sort of individuals or groups of participants?
Yeah, that's possible. We actually had that for our Radar CNS Grafana dashboards, which we haven't yet included in this new dashboard. But yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think with the dashboards, I don't think any two projects have actually had the same requirements. So one of the reasons for choosing Grafana was, it's quite configurable. So there's a good degree of flexibility there for people to build sort of something that's custom to their projects. We actually, the very, very first iteration of a dashboard for Radar CNS was something we built ourselves. We quickly ran into this problem where we had to go back and redevelop things every time someone wanted something new.
Thanks.
So I have Yatharth Ranjan. So Yatharth's a computer scientist who graduated from King's College London. His interests are in mobile health and streaming, and he's presently working on a study monitoring lung patients with COPD and inflammatory lung disease. He's, as part of his PhD, he's doing a part-time PhD and working on the half as a developer for the Radar-based platform.
Thanks, Amos. Hi, everyone. I'm Yatharth. I'm presenting today on real-time data processing and potential of interventions with Radar-based. So we are recently developed this capability in Radar-based, and we are evaluating it in a study that's ongoing. So I'll be talking through introduction, what is real-time processing, and then what was the motivation to include it in Radar-based, what were the design considerations around it, and the architecture we're currently using, what are the core components of it, and how do we monitor that real-time processing framework, and lastly, a case study where we're using that. So what is real-time data processing? It's just analyzing a stream of data instantaneously, so without any time limitations on the output. So it's like continuous input of data, then processing, and then output. So it's like event-by-event processing of data. So we don't need to actually store large amounts of data. It's just as the data comes in, we process it, and the data goes out. And then it is adequate for systems that have continuous flow of data and that only rely on real-time data processes. So as it says, it advocates immediate processing of data. And unlike batch processing, that requires data collection, the stream processing just relies on this continuous stream of data. So in context of Radar-based, so we wanted Radar-based to allow for context-driven and context-aware and just-in-time possibilities for research and clinical domains. For example, including interventions based on real-time user data. So this involves aggregating the incoming raw data into features and then using those features to train a model in real time. And then also, whenever new data comes in, using the trained model to run inference. And based on the results of the inference, we will take some action. That could be an intervention or just sending an email to the clinician. It could be anything. So the action can be varying. So some other use cases of this could be like getting feedback from user on some passive data, like asking, so if our Fitbit data detected, okay, you were asleep from 10 p.m. last night, we can ask them in the morning, were you really asleep at that time? The second option is sending personalized interventions. And then lastly, we can also have like suggesting health improvements based on physiological data from wearables. So the motivation is like it provides us an opportunity, and also data analysts and clinicians, to make faster decisions, and that can be critical in a clinical context. The information that is used to get these decisions is always up to date, so the results provided provide more of an actionable intelligence and the ability to take action immediately. And it also allows it to process large amounts of data, and interact with it in real time, and that can be substantially faster than batch systems. And it can also help us support situation awareness through dashboards and alerts by analyzing multiple kinds of events in real time. And we can also have some like smarter anomaly detection and faster responses to disease state changes. And it also helps shield clinical teams from data overload by eliminating any irrelevant information and presenting only distilled versions of most important information. So the design considerations that went into this are more kind of like overall design considerations that also go into the radar-based platform. So flexibility, like we want the real-time framework to be able to support most common use cases and data types with different schemas. Extensibility, so we want the real-time framework to have the ability to add new features in the future at any point of the framework or the pipeline. Modularity, so the framework is distributed into smaller components that are easy to deploy and easy to find faults or isolate faults in case of failures. Interoperability, so the processes and the data flows are interoperable, allowing like new solutions to be integrated with ease. Visibility, so this is an important one. So we want the whole pipeline that's doing the real-time processing or real-time analysis to be visible. So we want to see what's happening at each point of the pipeline. And lastly, scalable, so it's easy to scale up or down depending on workloads. So going to the architecture, this is like a very high overview of what we have. So, Kafka, everyone has talked about that, right? So this is the backbone of Radarbase. That's a real-time message broker. So all the messages or all the data that goes through Kafka. So we have a raw topic, that's the raw data is coming in there. The raw data is read by a streams application that kind of generates aggregated features and then puts back in Kafka in a feature topic. And then from that feature topic, there's a database sync connector that syncs the data into a feature database. And then from that feature database, our analysis programs like decision tree models or anything can read that and run the real-time analysis on that database, or build the models in real time as well. And then the stream application can also query that model, the built model, and run real-time inference. And then we can take action based on that. This was a high-level overview. Diving into the more detailed architecture. So we have these different devices that are pouring data into Kafka. And then for our streams that kind of aggregate the data and run real-time inference, we're using KSQL, as Pauline said. So that kind of gives us a nice interface, SQL-based interface. Just write some SQL to aggregate the data. And then that raw data is aggregated and that is put back into Kafka. And then we sync that data into a feature database in real time. So for example, the KSQL can be running aggregations of hourly time windows and taking mean, standard deviation, doing that for different data types. And then from that feature DB, we have a ML model builder module that kind of runs periodically. It can be set to run on any periodic schedule. So currently we're running it daily to build a model based on the features that are most recent. So every day it builds a new model based on the features. And then it's actually cut out, but there's a component there, ML flow. So I'll talk about it a bit more detail later. So it's just for storing the trained models and versioning of it. And then we have an ML model inference module that's just a REST API that exposes that trained model to be for inference to be run in real time. So now, when the new data is coming in, you can see the KSQL has a function that runs the inference in real time using the model inference. So that part is kind of done in real time. So whenever we get a new data, the KSQL makes the call to model inference. The model inference reads the latest or the best performing model from MLflow, and then runs the inference and returns the result. Now the result is coming back here, and then that result is also propagated back to Kafka. Now, because everything is going through Kafka, we can have high visibility of everything through Kafka. We can just plug in a new consumer on Kafka and see what happened with the aggregated or what happened with the inference score, or if the raw data is coming in or not. And then once the inference score is there, another consumer of that topic can do any action based on the inference values or the scores or whatever the result of your running your model is. And then, for example, here we have a scheduling of a notification through the app server to the active app, which will give user a questionnaire, so it can be essentially used as an intervention mechanism. For the core components, as I already mentioned, KSQL, that kind of aggregations and trigger inference on incoming real-time raw data. Then the feature DB stores and aggregates, stores the aggregated features to be used for training or inference. And the ML model builders on the training of models on a schedule. The model inference exposes the REST API to run inference on trained models. Consumer consumes the results of the inference and takes an action, like an intervention. The app server is just a component that supports the ARNT app that has the capability to send push notifications. And the MLflow is open source machine learning model tracking software that we're using to store our models. So just a little bit more about MLflow. So it is especially useful for tracking, versioning, and storing of models. This is because we wanted high visibility of how our training runs are performing, and to be able to check it through like a web UI and make changes to that based on the results. Also, you can store like metrics with the model. So when running inference, you can get a model by the latest version or the best performing model, which has the least error scores. So yeah, we have, I want to show into it, but yeah, this is the URL where I've deployed it for radar at King's. I'm using it in the study. So alongside that, we also have monitoring through Grafana, as Colin mentioned, but this is a customized dashboard that I created for our study specifically. So you have different, like the questionnaire scores here, CAT, questionnaire, pulse. So we also asked them to record finger pulse OX. And then there's Garmin data here. And then here on the top, you can see this one, the log. That's the real-time inference that we are running right now. And that's the anomaly detection method we are running. And it just tells you if anomaly was detected or not. So it's all zero in this screenshot. I'll just quickly show you also. Sorry, I did log in. Never mind. I'll show you later during lunch if anyone is interested. So now moving on to the case study that we're using this real-time framework on is part of my PhD, which is supervised by Amos and Richard. It is remote assessment of lung disease and impact on physical and mental health. It's been published as a trial, and also there's a protocol published on Jamaican Health. So the description of the study is like a prospective cohort pilot study that we want to use to assess the potential of remote monitoring technologies in 3 different lung disorders. So it's ILD, COPD, and post-hospitalized COVID-19 patients. The primary objective is to assess the feasibility and acceptability of remote monitoring of patients with chronic lung diseases. And the secondary objective of this study is to provide data for power calculations for a larger longitudinal follow-up study if this pilot study is successful. So the motivation to do this study was just to create these chronic lung disorders are characterized by unpleasant exacerbations. It can be sometimes severe enough to cause hospital admission and NHS pressures during these COVID times, and also death sometimes. So yeah, because of COVID-19, the outpatient appointments have been limited, and access to breathing tests is also limited for these lung disorder patients. So this study is designed to understand if we can use remote monitoring using wearable sensors and commercially available devices to improve patients' quality of life and prevent disease progression. So remote monitoring offers a low-cost and safe solution of gaining visibility into the health of people in their daily lives. So a key part of the study is to detect exacerbations or deterioration of state in these in COPD, to understand the potential of real-time data collection, first of all, and also to simulate an intervention by detecting these exacerbations and sending users a questionnaire. So what we decided on using unsupervised anomaly detection methods because we didn't have any prior data set to train the classification models on. So we pre-process and filter data based on domain knowledge and what we found from the literature, and we only use the passive data that's from the Garmin wearable device for training and inference. And the model can detect both deterioration and recovery since it's anomaly detection, so any change in their normal state is detected. The models are trained on daily schedule, and the latest and the best model is used for running inference on incoming real-time passive data. And based on the inference, we take action that is sending a questionnaire called exacerbation rating scale through the active app to acquire responses at the time of event. And this will help us assess the performance of the model or evaluate the model performance. So this is the exacerbation rating scale. It's very simple, just 2-3 questions. So we ask if the symptoms have changed. If they have changed, we ask how acute the exacerbations are currently. And then lastly, we ask if they're taking any medications. So this is not an actual intervention. We are just using this to simulate an intervention to collect some time-sensitive information to evaluate the model performance. So what evidence we had from the existing data or literature? So this is from the existing data we have collected so far in the COPD cohort of this study. And you can see the associations between the wearable data, that's like resting heart rate, and between the patient-reported outcomes like questionnaire CAT scores or exacerbation scores, or even their spirometry, that's like a lung function test. So there's a high correlation between these. So this gives us confidence to use that anomaly detection just based on the passive data, because the passive data is highly correlated with their change of symptoms. Then also the literature, the one paper was published that says that increase of more than 5 points in the questionnaire CAT score is associated with exacerbations. So we use that to filter out our baseline data. So if there's a change of more than 5 in the CAT score, we exclude that data from training, so that our model is just based on baseline. And then when a new data point comes in that is different from their baseline, we detect an anomaly. So this is an example of anomaly that we detected currently. So you can see that red point there, that is when the anomaly was detected. So I'll mark that as a black line here, that is when the anomaly was detected. The arrow is when we put this framework in place or online for it to be running. So that's why I didn't detect this peak. That was probably an exacerbation, but it detected a recovery here. So when it came back to its normal state. So that was quite encouraging. Let's see. All right, thank you. I was also like to say special thanks to Heath, Polly, Amos, and Richard who made this possible. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Very exciting piece of work.
Thanks.
Do we have any questions?
For your event streaming, just what sort of use cases you're doing? Are you just aggregating? Are you simplifying the data? What actual operations are you doing on the stream?
So it's just aggregating and calculating different features. So we have mean, standard deviation, min, max, and then we also have skew.
Over a given time slice.
So it's hourly windows, so every hour.
Okay. We're just about caught up with the schedule.
We should have lunch served next door in the kind of area.
Yes. It's already ready, so you can just go. And see you back at 1:30
Hey, well, nice to see you.
Good question. So it's trying to work out your background.